Yes, it's another one of these videos that I've been doing for probably the last 5 or 6 weeks. I change up here and there, but for the most part, I'm still talking about race. I'm still talking about diversity. I'm talking about fairness, talking about equality. It's time to talk about it. And this is going to be a little bit different than the other things. You know, I've talked about how white people can help us. I've talked about how I've had some difficulties in dealing with some of the stuff that's been going on. This one's going to be a little bit different. The reason it's going to be a little bit different is because what I don't think is getting passed along as much as everything else is that black people are not a monolith. We don't all believe in the exact same thing in the exact same way. It's just not how it is. And I'm hearing from the resistance side that we're all the same. We all want handouts. We all want this. We all want that. We complain all the time, whatever that, blah, blah, blah. It ain't true. Even though the stuff that we're complaining about is true, at least from my perspective. But in general, we're not all like that. There are these two women who were on, that fake news channel, that's what I call it, who believe in the orange guy as much as anybody and don't believe that there's any discrimination in the world until they went too far and then they got fired for discrimination. So there you go. It all comes back eventually. But you have those people. I can't remember the guy's name. I remember Ward Connerly. Oh my God. There's a name from the past. Who wanted to overturn affirmative action in California. He worked hard for that. He also worked on it in a bunch of other states and got it overturned in a lot of different states because he didn't believe in it. And he was black. So that happens. There are certain people in Hollywood who happen to be black who don't have the exact same feelings. And, one of those kind of things that I always tend to believe is that if you have never really dealt with certain people, or if you have succeeded, maybe you've gotten to a point where people are actually throwing themselves at your feet, you might see things a little bit differently. You might not, but you might. I mean, for every Denzel Washington, there is a Chris Rock. They're both successful, but they're successful in totally different ways. So how they may see race and racism and diversity might be different. It's just a reality. And by the way, I'm not telling you anything out of school. Go research it for yourself. That's all I'm saying. So I wanted to share 7 things that show that we are not all the exact same thing. I don't want people walking down the street and thinking we all look alike and we all know each other. It doesn't happen that way. As a matter of fact, one of those kind of things that happens here where I live and doesn't happen in Memphis, Tennessee, where I was for a while, is here, whenever a black person encounters another black person, we give the nod, the little bit of dap. We do that. Why? Because there's not a lot of us here, especially in the suburbs. But even in the city, if you're in certain areas, most areas, you walk by another black person, you get the dap. But in Memphis, it doesn't happen. Why? Because Memphis is 66% black. They're used to seeing each other. They expect to see each other. So it's different. It doesn't happen in Washington, D.C. either, because I've been there. But any other city I've ever been to, yeah, it happens often. So let's get to the first point, which is easy to say. We all have different backgrounds. So how did I get into thinking about race? Because I was a military kid. I lived on military bases for most of my life. I lived in Tokyo, early life. Lived in Tokyo, Japan. I lived in, here in North Syracuse area. I lived in Limestone, Maine. But I also lived in Kansas City, Missouri, in the ghetto for a year when my dad was in Vietnam. And you know what? They didn't like me for about 8 months. The black kids hated me. Why? Because I was so different than they were. I've told this story. I've written about it, but everyone doesn't hear it. Not everyone has seen my videos. When I went to school in Kansas City, I was many grades ahead of everybody else. And I was in the 5th grade, but they were still reading Dick and Jane books. They were doing addition. They weren't even doing subtraction. They were still doing addition. They knew how to work money, but they couldn't equate money and math. I had no idea why. The teacher used to spend the first 45 minutes to an hour taking different kids into the back bathroom and washing them, because some kids wore the exact same clothes every day. There was no homework. You couldn't have those kids taking school books out of there, one, because they may not bring them back, and two, because some of those homes did not have any electricity. So it wasn't going to help. So when you've got something like that, eventually you start to see, hey, you know, this is way different than anything I've ever had. And the school I went to in Kansas City, every kid in the school was black except for one. He was Mexican, and they all loved him. So there you go. Him they loved, me they hated. And until my dad came home from Vietnam in a half body cast, and we went to school. That changed things, because now they saw that as something totally different. That's just how it is. But we all come from different backgrounds. Some come from rich, families. Some went to private school. Some went to a school that was totally deficient, like the school I went to in Kansas City. That is just how it happens. You have some black people who have been the only black family in their town, and you have others who grew up in a town that was mainly black. Denzel Washington, for instance, grew up in Mount Vernon, New York, 61% black. So, you have these differences in backgrounds. So when you have different backgrounds, you won't have the exact same thoughts. For that matter, when I talk about diversity, because I've written about diversity on my business blog and whatever, and I've done, some diversity seminars, one of the things you find out is that you get two people who lived in the same neighborhood, on the same street, went to the same school, graduated at the same time, went to the same college, but quite possibly have different views of things. That's just how it is. So we are not all the same because we come from different backgrounds. Here's the next thing. We don't all hate the police. We say we hate the police for the most part because we hear about these things that happen and we don't like that. And it's the police who get away with it, because very rarely do police actually get arrested for doing some of the things they do, let alone get convicted for it. So it doesn't happen all that often. However, probably all of us have met police officers who we think are kind of nice and are kind of cool. I tend to blame it on what I call the fraternity thing. When you get a group of people together, they act a lot different than they do when it's just one-on-one. They just do. It happens in college. I hated fraternities and sororities in college because they acted like that. I didn't join the service, and I had it in my mind to join the service up until I was age 14. Because then I saw how stupid they acted when they got together as a group. I'm an only child. I am more of an introvert than an extrovert, even though I do videos. I couldn't stand that kind of behavior. So it just wasn't me. But I've known a lot of police officers in my life. And I've had conversations with some of them, and there have always been a nice conversation. There are those who could care less, who are really looking to go out there and hurt somebody, because you get this feeling of superiority. Sometimes when you have a badge or you're wearing those uniforms or whatever. But you take that away and you meet them in a different environment, and they will have a good conversation. Now, maybe because my background is a little bit different, I can have that conversation, but I don't think it's just me. I really don't. But I could be biased. I could be misinterpreting it. But we don't all hate the police. Next thing. We don't all see the reality of things. So one of my friends sent me this video, and it had different people on this video, all black people, who did not believe in racism in certain ways. And some of them said, well, we just need to work harder. And some of them said they've never experienced it in their lives. And some of them said, it's not that, it's culture, it's this, this, this. And, it's hard to reconcile that with some of the things that go on that only happen to black people. Okay, it happens to Latinos as well. It happens to Asian people of Asian descent. It happens to a lot of other folks, but it happens more to us. People want to say that black people commit more crimes because 61% of all the people who are arrested are black. Well, no. If you've concentrated all the police in those areas, of course that's what it is. And when you have police who are pulling people out of cars who didn't do anything just because they're black, yes, those numbers go higher. On my last article, blog article, I mentioned a whole bunch of names. A name that's familiar in this area, a guy named Johnny Gamage, who was from here. He was the cousin of a football player for the Pittsburgh Steelers named Ray Seals. And a cop killed him the same way as George Floyd. Just pulled him over. It happens all the time. And you can't say, well, if you weren't speeding, if you weren't doing this, if you weren't doing that. There's a lot of small towns in Texas that are looking for black people to pull over. And they're taking their money. They don't even bother, acting like they're going to arrest them. They just take their money and they have them move on. And it turns out it's legal. Yeah, tell me about that one. Number 4, we don't expect everyone to support us openly. Yes, there's been a lot of talk out there saying if you don't show support for us, that means you support the other side. Boy, that's a tough thing to have thrown at you because a lot of people are still scared. I understand the fear that some people have in not wanting to give an open opinion on something. And to be put into that corner, there's that fear. What do? Some people are being shouted down because they say the wrong things. Sometimes you deserve it. Sometimes you don't. I'm just being honest on that. You get worried. There were a lot of people who were trying to say some of the right things, real soon after George Floyd was killed, and they were getting beat down by social media. Sometimes you got to recognize when a friend is a friend. And if you alienate your friends, then you ask for the exact same kind of thing that you're trying to say you're trying to stop. So we can't always go after that. Going after the Karens is one thing, or the Allens. That's a word I heard talking about the white men who are calling the police on someone Allen. I don't know if they've changed it yet, but we've had Karen and we've had Becky. I don't know who's coming up next. I don't make these things up. So, we can't expect that everyone is going to do it. What we hope for, and this is the next one, we're hoping everyone is informed, but we know it won't happen. I have had a lot of support from a lot of people on social media, and I appreciate it. A lot of these people I've known for a good long time. And they knew I was in distress, and some of those people came out. And some of my friends have actually, stopped and got me food and brought food for me and my mother, and that's nice. I actually had some guy, a couple of days after I was fearful of leaving the house because I just had this bout of anxiety, I'm at Subway, and a guy I didn't even know he did it, paid for my meal. Informed. That's what you're looking for. And the thing is, we know that everyone's not going to be informed because if that was happening, we'd have more of you idiots, yeah, I'm saying it, wearing masks. And not only looking to save your own life, but looking to save the lives of other people. It's so stupid and so selfish. Wear your mask. Yes, I've gone into another subject here, but it's all kind of the same thing. You've got to think about other people. Don't always just sit there thinking about your own self. I wear the mask. It's just what we do. So, that's the next one. The next thing, we don't all believe the same thing. I've kind of talked about that, but this is a little bit different. There are some folks who think that the best thing you can do is work as hard as you can and you will succeed. It ain't always going to happen. I did not come up with the phrase glass ceiling. Glass ceiling is a real thing. It's real for minorities. It's real for women. There's only four black people who are in the S&P 500 as CEO. 4. In all of college football, major college football, there are only 4 black head coaches, and one of them is here in Syracuse. In the NFL, there are only 2 minority coaches. I ain't making this stuff up. Actually, I think there's 3, because I almost forgot Ron Rivera. So, 3. Don't even try to tell me, But you're going to have some folks that say, well, at least we got 1. You're going to have that. There it is. It's just out there. We don't all believe in the same thing, even when we see the numbers. But you know what? When they voted a Democrat in Alabama, it was 96% of black women who got him in office. I'm just telling it like it is. When that orange guy was elected president, you know what his percentage was in New York State? 25%. You know why? Because we knew him. So he only won 25% in his own home state. He's one of only 4 presidents in history who got crushed in his home state. There it is. So that's 6, and here's the last one. The one thing we all believe, this is something everybody believes, is that we all deserve a chance and we're willing to work for it. We may not all know how we're supposed to work for it. We may not all have the exact same education to be able to get those jobs, but we're willing to work. We're willing to learn. This idea about the welfare mom wanting to stay home, it's a fake in general. Yes, some of those people get used to that, but a lot of them want to get an education. They want to get out. Some of them have children. They can't pay for daycare. Some of them, if Medicaid set up a program where women can get so much money to go and learn and have their children at some kind of daycare, so that that's something else they don't have to worry about, because now we throw people in jail if they leave their kids at home by themselves. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to throw them in jail, but my parents left me at home a lot. As a matter of fact, that's one of those things people say, well, your parents left you all the time. No wonder you're a mess. I don't know. But, folks want to get an education. Folks want to learn something. They want to have an opportunity to get good jobs. No one wants to live bad forever. And no one wants to, just have to live off the government. Except for health care. That's a different story. I talk about it on a different channel. I'm for universal health care. But we just have to acknowledge that everybody wants to have a fair chance to succeed. There you go. That's what I got. Y'all let me know what you think. My name is Mitch Mitchell. I'll talk to you next time.